A chart that I've been keeping on apprehension southwest border. Just to give you some quick numbers here. To date, this calendar year, there have been almost 1.3 million apprehensions. We are averaging the last 2 months 67 to 6,800 people per day. That's a large caravan per day being apprehended by Border Patrol. 8 to 1,100 known gotaways, which would equate somewhere over 300,000 gotaways, known gotaways for the year. If you annualize these figures, been a couple 100,000 people per month. We'll be up to about 2.1 million apprehensions. Add the getaways, 300,000 to 400,000. We're up to 2.5 million people. You have repeatedly stated that our borders are not open, that they're closed. Do you honestly believe that our borders are closed?
Senator, I do. And let me speak to that. We have
let me ask you a couple questions here. This committee received, it was dated September 11th, but apparently this letter was not received till Thursday. I didn't find out about it till yesterday. I released it to the public immediately. By recently retired U.S. Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott. In this letter, former Chief Scott states, he is sickened by the avoidable and rapid disintegration of what was arguably the most effective border security in our nation's history. And of course, the chart shows it. We'd pretty well secured the border. We'd stopped the flow of unaccompanied children. We'd stopped the flow of family units because of the migrant protection protocols, of the agreements that President Trump put in place, the building of the wall. We were serious about border security until your administration took office. You stood before this committee and said that you would enforce the laws. You have not done that. Let me go on. Chief Scott says, to think that well-resourced terrorist networks, criminal organizations, and hostile nations are not going to do the same, in other words, exploit the open border, is naive. Here's what's very troubling. He said the Secretary and other political appointees within DHS have provided factually incorrect information to congressional representatives and to the American public. So let me ask you, Mr. Secretary, of the 1.3 million people that we've apprehended, how many people have been returned, how many people are being detained, and how many people have been dispersed? And I want some numbers here. So again, 1.3 million people. How many people have been returned? How many people are being detained? How many people have been dispersed to all points around America?
Senator, I would be pleased to provide you with that data.
I want them now. Why don't you have that information now?
Senator, I do not have that data.
Why not?
For me.
Why don't you have that basic information?
Senator, I want to be accurate in the information.
I'm looking for ballpark figures. Is it about half? Have we dispersed about half of that? Are we up to about 600,000 people we dispersed?
Senator, these are the tools that we employ. We use the Title 42 authority, that is the public health authority empowered by the Centers for Disease Control to expel individuals in light of the
So I'm hearing that you're not using that to the full extent and that we've got 50% of people, even apprehended under Title 42, that are not being returned. Is that accurate?
That is actually inaccurate.
Okay, so what is the, okay, so if you're saying that's
Senator,
inaccurate,
would you care to let the
figure?
witness finish an answer?
I actually want answers to my questions. What is the real figure then?
If I may say, Senator, we use the Title 42 authority, the public health authority of the Centers for Disease Control to the fullest extent we are able to.
So what is the percent that you are returning under Title 42? It's about 750,000 people apprehended under Title 42. How many of those individuals have been returned under Title 42?
Senator, I will provide that data to you.
So you're saying that 40 to 50% is not accurate. If you know that that's not accurate, you must have the real number.
Senator, what I said was not accurate was your assertion that we are not using Title 42 authority to the fullest extent that we can.
No, that's not what I said at all. I said we're not returning everybody under Title 42. We're dispersing a number of those individuals.
Senator, not for reasons of our limitation of use that we impose on ourselves, but rather because certain of our capacity to return people under Title 42 is constrained by the Mexican authorities' ability to receive them. This is a matter of bilateral and multilateral relationships. We exercise the Title 42 authority to the fullest extent that we can. We then work with Mexico to assess what its capacity to receive individuals is.
Okay, again, you're talking about the process. I want numbers. I'm going to expect numbers. By the way, in our last hearing, which you didn't stick around for a second round of questions, you didn't come in here in person, I sent you questions for the record. I've got no response whatsoever. And you came before this committee, and you committed to responding to congressional oversight, and you have not done so. And according to former Chief Scott, you've provided factually incorrect information to Congress. So we're expecting you to up your game as it relates to congressional oversight. Let me quick switch to Afghanistan. We had a briefing yesterday morning, telephone briefing, and one of the assertions is that of the 124,000 Afghans that were evacuated out of Afghanistan, the majority, I can't remember, like the vast majority or almost all, worked for some government agency, the military, whatever. I asked the question, how do you know that? I didn't get an answer. I've also talked to the commanding general and the people on the ground in Fort McCoy that have about 13,000 of these Afghans in their custody right now in Toma, Wisconsin, or Sparta, Wisconsin. I continue to ask. I understand the screening. They were screening against the terrorist watch list and the no-fly list, that type of thing. So I understand how if for example, an ISIS fighter or al-Qaeda terrorist, if they just happen to be on one of those watch lists, if we have a match, we're going to keep them out of the country. What are we doing to positively identify people, to connect them to these agencies or the members of the military that they did have connection with so that we have positive ID before we disperse? Because let's face it, 124,000 people, we got 700,000 SIVs, we got about 6,000 U.S. citizens. That leaves 117,000 people. We don't know who they are. How do we know who they are positively, not just in terms of derogatory information?
So not only do we vet individuals against our intelligence databases, but we also vet them against the Department of Defense databases. We capture their biographic and biometric information in the transit countries before they are allowed to board flights to the United States. We have expert screeners and vetters whom we have deployed to those transit countries so that they can use their expertise in addition to the information that we have captured biometrically and biographically before they board the flights.
Many don't even have
The senator's time has expired.
Senator Carper, Senator Johnson, you're recognized for your questions.
Director Wray, have you read the Michael Sussman indictment?
I've had a chance to glance at it, but I haven't had time yet to read through it.
I would suggest you and everybody else read that because it really does lay out exactly what happened to create this political turmoil for 2 or 3, 4 years, really during the Trump administration. It lays out how the Hillary Clinton campaign paid for, through Michael Sussman, completely false allegations that Trump was cooperating with Alpha Bank, planted that story, had an audience with James Baker, FBI, so that the FBI would open up an investigation so that they could report that news. Same exact dynamic in terms of the false steel dossier that also contained Russian disinformation, which the FBI knew about certainly is no later than January 2017. You worked at the Justice Department, as did Michael Sussman. Did you know Michael Sussman?
To my knowledge, I've never met the man.
But did you know him by reputation?
Not particularly, no.
Okay. What do you think James Baker knew Michael Sussman?
I really can't speak to whom James Baker knew.
Do you think it's credible that James Bacon, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Lisa Strzok, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, these individuals had no idea who Michael Sussman was and who his clients might be?
Senator, I certainly understand why you're asking the question, but
Good.
given that, but if I could just finish, given that this is an ongoing criminal case being brought by the special counsel with whom we are actively cooperating, I want to make sure
that's fine. I won't get an answer. Yeah. But let me just make the final point here. So either the FBI was completely clueless or corrupt, but they didn't check into whether Michael Sussman might have been working for the Hillary Clinton campaign before they opened up the investigation to leak to the press, which put this nation through 3-4 years of political turmoil. There needs to be a political accountability, and I hope John Durham has a whole lot more that he's going to be revealing, because I got virtually nothing out of you based on subpoenas. It was interesting listening to your exchange with Senator Paul. You said it was unacceptable what happened. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. But you were confirmed in August of 2017. In February 2018, the Senate Intel Committee was briefed by Bill Priestap, and the bottom line of that is Bill Priestap of the FBI continued to say the Steele dossier was credible, even though the FBI knew in January 2017 that it contained Russian disinformation. Now, that was under your watch. Do you have an explanation on that?
Senator, as I said, we've been working very closely with Special Counsel Durham, and I want to be careful not to start talking about things that may be with.
Okay, that's fine. So another non-response. In February 2020, senior Democrats produced a false intelligence product, had it classified, leaked it to the press, accusing Senator Grassley and I of soliciting Russian disinformation, disseminating it. Completely false. But I can't tell you how many news stories were written about that. Fast forward to August of 2020. By the way, I held a hearing on Russian disinformation as part of my Foreign Relations Committee responsibilities in 2015. I'm well aware of the problem of Russian disinformation. So I didn't need a briefing that the FBI requested to give me. So I didn't ask for this briefing in August 2020. When I went to the briefing, there was absolutely no relevant information. It was a completely BS hearing, and I asked the briefers, who directed you to give me that briefing? And all they could say, it's interagency. Well, there are people in the interagencies. I wrote a letter immediately asking, first of all, what was the backup material for the briefing? I asked who directed it. I knew it was a setup. I knew it would be used just like the false intel product was used previously. So I wasn't happy. And, of course, then lo and behold, in late April, early May, it was leaked. That briefing was leaked to the Washington Post, again, accusing me of, disseminating Russian disinformation. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's false. So I got a number of questions which remain unanswered. I sent you a similar letter. What backed up the August briefing? Who directed that briefing? To this day, I have gotten no response. Now, how is it so difficult to respond? And by the way, Senator Grassley, former President pro tem of the Senate, former chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, is asking the same questions. Why is it that we can't meet with you? Why is it that you will not provide us that basic information of who directed a briefing to 2 U.S. senators that was then leaked for political purposes, used against us, false? Why won't you answer that very basic question?
So, Senator, I want to be a little bit careful of what I can say.
I can imagine you want to be careful, yeah. Yep. Go ahead.
I want to be a little bit careful about what I can say in this kind of setting about getting into specifics. I understand this is an important topic to you. Before we deliver a defensive briefing like the one that you're describing here, we follow a standard defined process that involves interagency discussion, deliberative process, to figure out whether a defensive briefing is even warranted. Just to take a step back, though, because it's important, the entire purpose of defensive briefings to an individual is
Mr. Gray, listen, you're just describing a process, and I understand the process, great. The process obviously broke down. There are all kinds of processes putting in safeguards in the FISA court that were obviously violated in that corrupt investigation. So, again, I'm just asking a simple question. Why won't you tell me in detail who was engaged in that process? But I'm not going to get – so I'm asking you to provide that answer. I'm asking you to give me a briefing, meet with me and Senator Grassley. We deserve to know the answers. Quite honestly, the American people deserve to know the answers. Secretary Mayorkas, real quick, in my 30 seconds left, you said you've gotten some numbers on the border. Are you willing to finally share them? Like, for example, like out of the 1.3 million people that have been apprehended, again, I get the complications. There have been multiple arrests, the same individual, fine. So the relevant piece of information would be how many people have you dispersed in America out of those 1.3 million people? How many people have been released into the interior either with a notice to appear or even worse, a notice to report? And again, you have to live in a fantasy world to think that they're going to report. But go ahead. How many people have been released?
Senator, I apologize. I do not have that data. I was reciting the data of encounters, apprehensions, use of Title 42, and use of Title 8 expedited removal. I will provide the data you have requested. I do not have it at my disposal.
Okay, I'll be expecting that information very soon. Okay, thank you. Don't have a score on exactly what the grant programs would be contemplating here, but whatever the cost would be, my amendment would just simply fund those from the unobligated funds for the American Rescue Plan. It's a pretty simple amendment. But while I have the floor here, I do want to speak to another issue that I think is important to this committee. This committee is the Senate Oversight Committee. When I was chair for 6 years, I know there was some support for investigations, some of my oversight, sometimes there wasn't. But when we have hearings on nominees, we ask them a question whether or not they will comply with legitimate congressional oversight requests. And they always say yes, and that's also true of, for example, the Help Committee. 5 senators from this committee sent letters to the NIH and the CDC, and then separately to the CDC and HHS. And we invoked 5 U.S.C. 2954, which states that an executive agency on request of the Committee on Homeland Security or any 5 members thereof shall submit any information requested of it relating to any matter within the jurisdiction of this committee. Now, again, this committee has broad oversight jurisdiction. We have not gotten those oversight letters responded to, not effectively, not in a complete format. Mr. Chairman, I sent you a letter, also signed by 5 senators, requesting that you utilize this committee's power to compel the agencies to follow the law. They shall supply the information. Now, I just want to use one example, a letter we sent to HHS Secretary Becerra requesting the unredacted emails from Anthony Fauci that were provided under a FOIA request to a number of different outside groups. We requested those same emails unredacted. By the way, congressional oversight is not subject to the redactions under FOIA. We should have received those completely unredacted. Proof of the fact that the redactions are not valid. I just have copies of one of the emails. This is an email from Peter Daszak dated April 18th, and it's just thanking Anthony Fauci for basically covering for EcoHealth Alliance. You can see in what was produced to the committee and in the FOIA request, we have a big old redaction here. And now it was redacted supposedly because it was related to an open law enforcement investigation. We basically got the same 4,000 pages, the 5 senators, except on this one email, they failed to redact that. So now we know what's under the redaction. Let me just quick read you what supposedly was related to an open law enforcement investigation. It says, it has been a very hard few months as these conspiracy theorists have gradually become politicized and hardened in their stance, especially because the work we've been doing in collaboration with Chinese virologists have given us incredible insight into the risks that these viruses represent so we can directly help protect our nation from bat-origin coronaviruses. We're fighting to keep the communications open with our Chinese colleagues so that we can better address future pandemics like COVID-19. I have no idea why that would be redacted in an oversight response to Congress. I have no idea how that paragraph could be related to an open law enforcement investigation. So I won't go in, I won't describe this any further other than to, again, make the point. This law that we are invoking that tells the agencies they shall turn over this information. This is a 100-year-old law. It's been modified 2 times, the most recent time in 1994, signed by Bill Clinton. The Supreme Court has affirmed Congress's need to have information to write effective legislation. For too many years, and again, I was the brunt of it for 6 years as chairman of this committee, government agencies, regardless of the administration, have thumbed their nose at congressional oversight. They just simply refuse to comply. So we end up being completely ineffective in an incredibly important constitutional duty and responsibility of Congress. Now, again, there is no reason. They have the emails. All they have to do is provide them to the 5 senators who have requested them in an unredacted fashion. By the way, our other oversight request is to CDC regarding any contact between the teachers' unions and CDC regarding their reopening of school guidance. Was that based on science? Was that based on political pressure? I think the public has a right to know. So again, as the Senate Committee on Oversight, if we sit back and do nothing, administrations in the future, regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat, whether Democrats are in the majority in the Senate or Republicans are, administrations will continue to ignore our oversight requests, and we will not be able to fulfill our constitutional duty and responsibility to our constituents. So I would hope that every member on this committee would join those 5 senators that join me and use this committee's power to subpoena those records to say in a very strong, unified, unanimous voice, Congress will not be ignored. Our oversight responsibilities are important. And we demand, we insist that the administration provide us this information. But, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking that you work with me to prepare a subpoena. Hopefully, we don't even have to vote on it. You have the power to issue it. I would certainly hope that Senator Portman would not send a letter of disapproval, but we can get this subpoena out forthwith and fulfill our constitutional responsibility to oversight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. And certainly I concur that we need to get information. We need to do our job here as an oversight committee and make every effort to make sure we're getting information necessary to conduct oversight. And I'm happy to consider any requests. I'm happy to continue to work with you on this issue as well, because I think it is something that we need to pursue. But I'm going to note that you requested the documents under 5 U.S.C. Section 2954 in December, and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals held that Section 2954 confers standing on a minority of members of the committee to obtain agency information. But the court recognized that the statutory right conferred by Section 2954 is entirely distinct from the committee's subpoena authority, and use of subpoena is inconsistent with this authority that you're invoking. That's my understanding of the law, but I'm happy to continue to work with you.
Again, we can put pressure on the agency from using that statute or committee subpoena.
Well,
so again, the way to affirm congressional's right to this information is for this committee to act separately from our request and support what we're trying to do here. Because if we don't, administrations of the future can continue to thumb their nose, and we might as well close up shop from a standpoint of oversight. Real quick, how much approximately is left unspent from the close to $6 trillion of COVID relief that Congress has passed over the last 18 months?
Senator Johnson, you know ARP was just passed, so a significant amount of that remains unobligated. But I can get that for the committee.
Well, the reason I ask is when we passed the $1.9 trillion, put air quotes, COVID relief package, there's about $1 trillion left unspent of the previous $4 trillion spent in 2020. According to the numbers I saw from CBO, about $700 billion of the COVID relief package, the $1.9 trillion partisan package, isn't even going to be spent till 2022 to 2028. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to make sure we roll these programs out in a responsible way.
But that's not COVID relief. That's something else.
It absolutely is. COVID relief can take time to get out to ensure that some long-term inequities that will last past the pandemic are dealt with.
Okay, well, I hope COVID's over before 2028. Can you give me that number, though? I'd like to know, as of today, how much of the $6 trillion of COVID relief remains unspent.
We'll make sure all the members on the committee have that data.
Just real quick, because you're talking about equity and taxes. Right now, the top 1% make about 21% of income, and they pay 40% of the income tax. The top 10% make about 48% of the income, and they pay 71% of income tax. And by the way, the top 1% will always make a larger share of income, because that's the definition of 1% and definition of 10%. What do you think would be more equitable? Again, top 1%, 20% of income, they pay 40% of tax. Top 10%, they make 48% of income, pay 71% of the income tax. What do you think would be more equitable? What should those percentages be?
Senator Johnson, the question I have is they're paying the percentages. Let's take your numbers are fact. That doesn't mean that they're paying a fair share compared to what regular Americans.
So again, if you're making, let's concentrate on the top 10%. If you're making almost 50% of the income, what percentage of the income tax should you pay?
What we are suggesting is that the wealthiest Americans go back to paying what they paid before the tax cuts of the last administration. So we are moving those tax rates back to 39.6%.
What do you think is the maximum amount any American should pay out of $1 of income to the federal government? Recognizing certain states take 10% and even more. But what should be the maximum amount an American should pay for every $1 of income should contribute to the federal government? What should that percent be?
So we have a tax plan. What it says is no one that makes under $400,000 should pay more than they paid now. So we have a commitment not to raise those taxes. But what we're saying is those that make more than $400,000 should pay.
But what's that percent? I mean, what do you think? So what is the percent that an American will pay out of $1 of income?
Senator John, overall, we think the right tax rate is 39.6% for the top rate.
So about 40%, okay. Senator Stabenow was talking about the glory years of budget surpluses, which, trust me, I wish we were back there in the late Clinton years. The reason we got there is, first of all, extremely strong economy through the 1990s. And I would argue that was set up by what Ronald Reagan did in terms of supply-side economics and setting up the conditions for business investment. So revenue actually did grow in 2000 to 20% of GDP. But that was short-lived. Because Senator Grassley is right. Long-term, no matter what the top marginal tax rate, we get about 17.4%. That's kind of what the American people in the end say that's about all we're going to pay, and they figure out some way to avoid paying the high top marginal tax rate. But the reason we had the surpluses is because spending was 18.5, 18, 17.7, 17.7% of GDP during those 4 years. Now, historically, it's gone up during recessions, like in the 83, early 80s to about 22.9. The first 4 years of President Obama, again, he came to office with the recession, it was 24 to about 22%. Last 4 years was about 20.8%. The president's budget is calling across the board for 24.5% spending of GDP. Don't you think that is way too much?
So one, I'll point out that those times that Senator Stabenow you mentioned, the top tax rate was 39.6%. So we're trying to go back to those levels. So, we talk about spending as the problem. One thing we think we should do is change the tax rates to make sure we do go back to fair rates at a time of a strong economy. And we don't think people are paying their fair share. We've seen that in the data. We've had a tax cut that did not do what we claimed it would do. So we are trying to go back and make sure that the top earners and corporations do something to make sure we can spend on infrastructure.
Final point, what I was pointing out, those outlays are going from averaging about 20% in the last 4 years around Obama to 24.5%. That's a massive amount of spending increase when we have, let's face it, a very strong economy, 5.8% unemployment. When I went to college, that was almost considered full employment. In my state, it's 3.8%. I just don't get all this spending when we're $28 trillion in debt. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gõ cửa trái tim van anh được vào, dù tình xót đau chung thân huyết đau, ngủ vùi với chim bao nỗi niềm mắt xanh xao, nhưng em vẫn ngóng tim anh mở cửa. Gõ cửa trái tim sao anh hững hờ, ngõ hồn tái tê năm canh thẫn thờ, nhện lòng mắc răng tơ để một mối bơ vơ, khi không anh nhốt em trong đợi chờ. Bằng vàng nên tiếng kêu nghe bẽ bàng, để em gõ cửa miên man mà anh không chút oan han. Em buồn lang thang gõ cửa trái tim, nghe xa nghìn trùng đèn mờ hắt hiu cô đơn tận cùng, đàn lợ phím sai cung, tình này cũng mông lung, tìm anh ai khóa để em lạnh lùng. Gõ cửa trái tim van anh được vào, dù tình xót đau chung thân huyết đau, ngủ vùi với chim bao nỗi niềm mắt xanh xao, nhưng em vẫn ngóng tim anh mở cửa. Gõ cửa trái tim sao anh hững hờ, ngõ hồn tái tê năm canh thẫn thờ, nhện lòng mắc răng tơ để một mối bơ vơ, khi không anh nhốt em trong đợi chờ. Tim anh bằng vàng nên tiếng kêu nghe bẽ bàng, để em gõ cửa miên man mà anh không chút oan han. Em buồn lang thang gõ cửa trái tim, nghe xa nghìn trùng đèn mờ hắt hiu cô đơn tận cùng, đàn lợ phím sai cung, tình này cũng mông lung, tìm anh ai khóa để em lạnh lùng. Đàn lợ phím sai cung, tình này cũng mông lung, định